Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from thefishroom.co.nz. We've done it. Made it through to Friday. Let's do coffee. Oh, that one didn't hit the right way. It's tasty though. Just hit the wrong part of the throat. All right, that's a good time. Okay, so we've got John kicking around at the back here. Morning, John. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Cool. Good, thank you. Good.
Good.
So just a wee update. We are planning on having Alexander from the Secret History living in your aquarium on with us. He's just had a bit of a few issues with a power cut that's happened in his area. Last we heard, he has got his power back on and restored. He's just basically logging everything on and booting everything up, and he'll be with us in 5 or so minutes. So that is good. So for the meantime, you've got me and John. So that's unfortunate for everybody watching, isn't it?
I'm actually just organising the invite now to Alex, so he's only going to be a couple of minutes.
Cool, easy as. So there we go. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Hope you all had a good week. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are looking forward to this coffee date that we've got planned and lined up. So that'll be a good time.
I know I am anyway.
Yeah.
Alex has got a really good YouTube channel. Interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And I would have to agree with both Brian and Rochelle. It is very cold. I was having a conversation with John pre-getting on this live of exactly how cold I'm beginning to feel. So that's not such a fun thing.
I'm kind of happy because he's been rubbing it in my nose for months now, how nice it is. And I've been looking at rain out there and snow. So it's time to suck it up.
Yeah, it's not a good time. It's not okay. Cool. Had much happening with your fish over the week or anything like that?
I've added some albino bristlenose.
Cool.
Just tiny little ones.
Yep.
And what else did I add? Some Otto Sinclair.
Nice.
And I added some more Coolioches.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ottos are eluding me at the moment. Every time I go to order them from my wholesalers, they've sold out by the time I get my order in.
Yeah. Well, they've been quite scarce over here for a while. And I walked into my local fish shop and I seen them. And apparently, according to the guy that was working there that day, they've always had them, but I know they've not. So we're not even... I just let him say what you had to say. But I bought 5 of them anyway, so
nice.
And I got them at a good price as well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, the happy-go-lucky tank that I set up the other day that's got some fish in it now. It's screaming out for Otto Sinclair, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with them because they're so small, but they work hard.
Yeah. I was a little bit dubious what other sort of algae-eating type fish I could put in there, purely because of the layout of the tank. Like, it's not going to suit a bristle nose. I didn't think it'd look right with algae eaters of any other description other than Ottos, so I'm just holding out for them to turn up. So
yeah,
Ottos are very seasonal, but they're also very sensational. So
yeah, it was only recently I discovered that there's a lot of different varieties of them as well. Like you get zebra Ottos, and I didn't know that until quite recently.
Yeah, I think we only get one species unless they're misidentified at export. Every now and then the odd things, random sorts turn up, but it's normally just the one species that comes in. So, Rochelle's asking me how the shell dwellers are. They're fine. They're spawn. There's no dramas there. The fry are growing up very comfortably. Everything's going good with them. I think you might have met the honey gouramis that I was losing at a significantly large rate, which I'm still losing at significantly large rates. So, in saying that, the smaller ones have now basically all gone. So it's just the bigger ones now, which seem pretty rock hard. So, it's unfortunate, but the shellies themselves are going fine. Probably due to go out into their own tank, to be totally fair, and just to grow them out for a little bit and maybe plan a wee display tank in the shop for them. So the shellies are going really well. So I'm happy with their progress.
I do fancy setting up a shelly tank. I really do.
Yeah. Also had a spawn of albino corridors yesterday, and the bronze corridors are spawning right at the moment. So
nice.
I'll pull those eggs after this. So yeah,
the right time of year as well for it, isn't it? For corridors.
Yeah. So I think it's only coincidental, but I've started feeding them the Fish Science Corridor tablet over the last 3 days. I'm sure it's only coincidental, but I can almost feel like I want to claim it as a win as well. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it is good.
Yeah.
And it was designed by corridors experts. So
yeah, it's got all the good stuff in it.
Aye, it has.
So not again. Many times I've said I'm not a fish breeder, so it'll be interesting to see how that comes about and works with that. So yeah, I've got the eggs in this egg tumbler at the moment.
All right.
So it's the first time I've played with one of them, so we'll see how that comes about. And I'm thinking I might possibly just put the bronze eggs in a small container with a bit of methylene blue and an air stone and just let them kind of tumble around that way and see if that makes any difference. So yeah.
I've never used an egg tumbler before.
I've used them for African cichlids. I found them pretty efficient and pretty effective, so that was good. But they're a different type of egg than like sticky corridors eggs, so we'll see how that goes. It's all sort of trial and error. It kind of caught me off guard, so I wasn't overly prepared. Had the tank space and all that kind of stuff ready, which wasn't a difficult part. It was I've got eggs. I've got to deal with these before something happens with them, and I didn't pay too much attention to possibly a better method. So yeah.
Cool. What kind of corridors are they?
What's that, sorry?
What kind of corridors?
Albino and bronze.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I've spawned bronze before many years ago. This is how little I have had much interest in breeding fish. It's just never been on the top of my agenda. We're talking maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I think I just put them in a small plastic takeaway container in my fish room and just let them hatch. And within a few days, there was little wiggling things hanging around, and that was it. So I'm almost feel like I want to apply that method as well for these ones. Just put them in a small container and see how they go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Anything else been happening in the shop?
Yes. So all the 3 display tanks are all now set up, all with fish, plants and that kind of stuff. So the dwarf tanker tank's got some cynodontis in it and some lupii, which are stunning, beautiful orangey gold yellow fish, which I absolutely adore. And then the blackwater tank is slowly but surely coming along quite nicely. I'm thinking of adding a few more cherry barbs to it. I think there's about 15 in it at the moment. Maybe adding 5 or 10 more, possibly. But they're growing nicely. The dwarf chain loaches are doing their thing in there, and the pearl gouramis are growing really well in there. So I'm happy with that. And then the other one along, which is the happy-go-lucky tank, the plants are all beginning to root in a little bit. There's less of them being sort of found in the morning floating, which is a nice start. And so the sunset platy's in there, which are absolutely beautiful, and the green fire tetra as well, which I'm over the moon with. So I might put a few more green fire tetras in there. I think again there's about 15. I might put another 5 in there just to bolster that up just a little bit. And then you're just waiting for some autos, and maybe put some pygmy cories or some salt and pepper corridors in there as well, just to finish that off, I think.
How are you getting on with the betas?
Selling them or having them, or the rack?
The rack.
Yeah, it's pretty much done. I'm regretting my decision in filter. I'm very underwhelmed with the Marina slimline that I've got, unfortunately. But they were the only ones that would fit. I found them ridiculously noisy, and I have found them to not actually work all that well. It might mean that I need a bit of extra attention. I'm not sure, but I've not been overly impressed with them. But that's all pretty much functioning, other than one bank of 2 racks. So we're good to go.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool. Well, you can see what I can see, so I'll let you do the honors.
Good as gold. All right.
Hey,
Hello, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a bit of a mad scramble this morning, but it's excellent now that the power's back. I don't know what they're doing on my street, but we've lost the electricity 3 or 4 times in about 3 weeks for 12 to 15 hours each time. So I don't know what's going on. They won't tell me. Like, I asked them and they're like, "Oh, we're working on figuring that out." So
working on figuring that out. That's not really words you want to hear.
No, yeah. But you know, as a fish keeper, between that and the municipal water doing a yearly flush out that threw the TDS up an extra 200 points.
Ooh.
It's been a bit of a trying time with the city.
Yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah,
and especially after just getting back as well. This is the last thing you want.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm actually going to do a video. I was recording it when the power went out earlier, and it was on what happens if you leave the kind of tanks I've set up for 20 days without food or any care or top offs or anything. And that's kind of either low filtration or no filtration. But there's scuds, there's amphipods, isopods, so like seed shrimp and all sorts of little food. Plus there's shrimp and there's fish that are usually spawning that have baby fish. So it kind of becomes its own food chain, the way I try to set up most of my tanks. So yeah.
Ecosystem.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think that far away.
Yeah, I think there's a slight delay or something. I'm not sure. Is it how am I coming through to you guys?
You're coming through pretty okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I think the joys of everyone being on 3 different parts in the globe and running on internet makes just things a little bit weird in different places, no matter what.
Okay. Well, pardon if I speak over anybody in that case.
That's okay. We're used to it.
Yeah. So, but what you were basically saying with the way you were running your aquarium sort of leads me into a question that I had for you to start with. Anyway,
Sure.
Which is your microbiome food web type situation where you've got everything sort of self-sustaining and self-running. Can you go into a little bit of depth on that and how you've come about to be working in that sort of style of aquarium?
Yeah. So for years I kept fish, mostly guppies. I bred guppies and other live bears. Since I was probably about 12 is when I started doing it for profit, for like a side business or hobby, kind of like a little more than a hobby, I guess I'd call it. And that was back when as a teenager, eBay was new for me, and I mean, it had just been invented, and so was working on eBay and local classified ads and things like that. And it was always kind of a limited market back then, but there was more of a local culture in it, and so I was more focused on the fish and the genetics and just production, I guess. And I didn't ever have plants. It was always gravel bottom, and I was always doing a lot of water changes. And, you know, I really didn't know too much about doing, you know, more than adding like some sort of buffer that was a pre-store bought. I didn't know anything about the crushed coral or using shells or anything like that, because our water is really soft in Seattle here. It comes out of the tap at 20 to 30 parts per million usually. And that's chlorinated. So that's probably all that's in the water, probably off gases, most of it. But I got into that and then kept, a handful of community aquariums with different roommates and different girlfriends and things that I lived with throughout my late teens and 20s. And then I lived in a place where I couldn't keep fish for a couple of years. And all of a sudden, I guess it's 8 years ago now, I met my wife, and we had moved into a place together, and we were going to get married and everything at that point. And she had an issue with how dark it is in Seattle so much of the year, called seasonal affective disorder, or SAD is the acronym, where her vitamin D would get really low and all that. And she had been living in Florida before she moved up here, and so it was a big change for her. And by the middle of winter every year, she would just get like clinically just really bummed and depressed, and her health would go downhill too, like vitamins and everything. So her doctor said, get a light. And I looked into the lights, and they were really, really expensive at that point. So I decided, like, maybe I can find a grow light or something instead. So I started doing research on that, and all of a sudden I found, in college I'd lived at a kind of a hippie commune, basically, for lack of a better word, but we did aquaponics there with tilapia and duckweed and the whole, like, strawberries and chickens and kind of your stereotypical setup there for producing food. So it kind of, with that in my background, in my mind, and then with what was on the internet, like the Green Machine out of the UK and Takashi Amano's stuff, I started seeing aquascaping, and I had this like desire to get a tank again, and I had the need to get a light, and I realized I could buy a whole setup and have a fish tank in the living room for my wife, and I'd get a fish tank out of it, So it started with one tank, and then she's like, "Oh, it really helps, it feels like, it doesn't feel like the dead of winter in here all the time." So then it went from 140 gallon to another 20 long, and then I set up the guest bedroom, and pretty soon now I'm sneaking more tanks in, and I've been at 25 to 35 tanks, give or take, running. And I guess the style, I kind of had the opportunity, if you keep continuously, it's hard to reinvent yourself or to want to try something totally new. You kind of just keep plugging along at the tanks that you have. And the fact that I got to kind of start all over, and that the YouTube was such an active idea forum, so to speak, people like Dustin's Planted Tanks and stuff, like, and I'm friends with Dustin, but I can only take so much of watching his intensity and everything, but I loved what he was doing. So I'd get ideas from channels and things, and it's definitely people like that inspired me. But then I didn't like how calm, like, some of the Japanese aquascaping was, and how high tech that end of it was. It felt a little too serious or for a while. So I kind of just found a place in between all of that. And I had read Diane Walsted's book, and the one on soil planted tanks that she did in like 92 or 3. That book I read probably about 8 years ago now, and that kind of kicked off my idea of doing dirted tanks. And I did that, but then I started keeping shrimp. I realized that the ammonia and and things like that could kind of spike a little more uncontrollably if you didn't have a really good sand cap and things like that. So then I started getting into the aqua soils, and then I actually got a job at a place called Aquariums in Seattle, and kind of was taken on as a bit of an apprentice under Steve Waldron, who's been an aquascaper first in the Bay Area and then in Seattle. He's been active in that community, and he went and actually took workshops and classes from Takashi Amano while he was still alive. So I was able to learn a lot from him, and basically just kind of worked for free at first to get my foot in the door. And then so between all those things, those are kind of my root influences. And then with the background in archaeology and history, I've always been someone who likes to go to the library or likes to go to the local university and go dig through papers and published papers and things like that. And I've just kind of kept up with a lot of that. And I mean, if you've seen my channel, a lot of what I kind of relay is whatever's new in that field and try to break it down for people in a little less of a dry way than like an abstract in a scientific paper tends to. And I guess I'll put all those pieces together, and a bit of laziness, honestly. I don't want a tank that I have to scrub, you know, a couple times a week or clean the algae and all that. Like when I was breeding plecos for a while, I was like, oh man, this is messy business, you know, how much they eat, things like that. So I tended, you know, and also living in Seattle, we've never had a house with 800 or 900 square feet. So like about 300 square meters, you know. So we've always lived in fairly small places. So that's also kind of got me into the nano fish. And then it was kind of, well, if I want to build a food chain, I guess I got to go down. I can't really just keep adding bigger fish or anything like that, like some people can. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
I think the mentality of making your aquarium work for itself, which is very much what, you know, when you set a tank up in a way where it cleans itself, it feeds itself. I'm down with that. Like almost every one of my tanks that I've set up, I've always had the free. Well, I know myself, and I know I'm lazy, so I always go for a setup that kind of just ticks over with very little input. And I find the less you have to do to a tank, the more natural it is anyway. And you discover different things about fish when you leave them alone in the right environment.
100%.
And that it just opens up a whole different observation level completely. And I love all that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've got a tank that I assembled. It'll be a year in, it's a year now, actually. I should do an update, but it's just a 5-gallon. It kind of looks like an old milk tin or jug, like the aluminum ones that's made out of glass. And it's been sitting in the window, but I put black worms in it, and I put little springtails on some immersed vegetation above it, and you know, made sure to go get pond water that was full of. It had everything from Daphnia, and then I put it in the windowsill so that it would grow algae most of the year. And then I basically put a cleaning crew. Like the fish in there are mostly fish like live bears that will eat up that algae, and only like 3 of them at a time. I've also rotated through white clouds and barbs in there, just seeing how they do. And then I found kind of my magic trick for my fish room is the Malawa shrimp from the island of Sulawesi. The Malawa is one of my favorite shrimp. It's not really in the hobby in the US. I happen to get it from the owner of Aquariums and Steve Waldron about 8 years ago. And I was just starting to get interested in shrimp, and he said this is a pretty hardy shrimp and you can breed it, unlike the Amano shrimp or some of the other ones, or Caradinas that at the time, especially a decade ago, were pretty hard to take care of still. And so he said, why don't you try these and some cherry shrimp? And I found that those, even though they're not colorful per se, they clean algae, everything but diatom algae, just phenomenally. And they have babies about every 45 days on cue. They have about 30 to 40 babies. So if you stock a tank and let the little life forms start taking foot for like a month or two ahead of everything else, and then you don't overstock it with fish, you can actually get a pretty good bio load of food in there for them, and you can top it off and supplement it, of course. And I do that especially if I'm breeding or trying to supplement for color enhancement, like feeding them carotenoids or anthocyanin rich foods and things like that. But everything else I kind of think of as trying to keep it if I feed it to the fish, then the output will be the fish poop, and then the snails and the shrimp are going to break that down further, and then bacteria will break that down further. And other than the rich minerality mixture that I've kind of been tinkering with for a few years now, that I put in the substrate deep down, and I like to do, if I can, a deep substrate of 5 or 6 inches ideally. And then I'll unless I'm doing a CO2 tank that's high light, that will allow me then to keep a tank running for like 5 years without having the soil to get depleted in it. It actually, you start to see the stratification just like you would if you took a core sample from like a lake bed or something. And being an archaeologist by training, that really kind of thrilled me that like a couple of years into keeping, when I started to think like, instead of just seeing it as like filled gravel or filthy gravel, that I had to gravel back. Now it's like this achievement to get this nutrient rich mulm layer. And I was talking to the chemist who works for CChem as their research and development guy. He's a PhD in microecology. And he was saying that where you see the orange rust line in your sediment, if you've got a tank like that, that's your I mean, probably not, you could probably call it anaerobic, not anoxic, I would say. But it means that there's very low dissolved oxygen, because that's where your iron that's in your sediment has already bonded with it. And any lower than that, it's kind of a good indicator that it's not going to have a lot of oxygen in it. And also you can look for, sulfur and methane bubbles building up below that layer, and they tend to originate below that orange layer. So once you have a tank up for a couple of years, I really love being able to use plants, and even like I'll use a ruby tetra, for instance, because their color is directly related to the nitrates, So if the nitrates even get to like 50, they start to fade out really quick. So I love the nuances of trying new fish or plants and looking for those cues and then using test equipment, obviously, to validate. But trying to kind of find these cues, or looking at the leaves and looking for the different signs of nutrient deficiencies and things, or if they're getting leggy or whatever it may be, and using all those things as indicators for what the tank needs. And as time goes on, I keep kind of tinkering with how small I can make that happen in, and how little of mechanical filtration and things like that I need, and which species need it, like hill stream species, rainbows, top minnows, things like that. A lot of them do need more O2 in the water or flow to seem to do really well. And breeding like catfish or any really protein rich dieted creature. But for a lot of the community fish that you would traditionally feed like a flake food or something like that, it's amazing how they can just live off the tank as long as you're not overstocking things,
Fire away, John.
No, I was just agreeing. I was just saying, totally. It's amazing the difference between the two kinds of fish. One demands so much more than the other.
Yeah, a good tip that I've kind of picked up from David Attenborough's special was, he's like a hero of mine. I don't know if he's that great of a scientist or anything himself, but man, I can fall asleep to that guy in like 5 minutes. He's like my grandpa, It's like visiting grandpa's house or something, being told a bedtime story. But listening to one of his nature videos a number of years ago, it struck me when he mentioned that predatory animals have their eyes in the front of their head, and they have binocular vision, and almost always that's the case. Well, even if you look at fish, a lot of times you'll see that their eyes either bulge out or they're set closer to the front, and they either have some overlap or near an overlap, whereas more vegetarian or omnivorous small fish, a lot of times their eyes are clear on opposite sides of their head, no overlap there, and they have other sensory organs that come into play. But I've noticed that if a fish has the ability to kind of focus its gaze forward, that tends to be a fish that's going to eat a high protein diet and won't work in those setups that I have. So it's not 100% always the case, but it's something that kind of clicked in my head about mammals and birds and reptiles. And I thought, I wonder if that's kind of true about fish. And it seems to hold pretty true. So little things like that to me are just like magical discoveries waiting to be found while I'm, staring off into space, looking at my tanks every night for an hour or two. So
that's really, really fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure there's that particular comment. There's even a wee light bulb that's ticking off on my head. Oh yeah, that does make sense. I'm sure there's a few people thinking the same thing.
I'm looking at my pufferfish, the pea puffers. Their eyes are clearly for pouncing.
Oh yeah.
And they've got like the autosynclists. They're like looking about like.
Yeah, well, exactly. Sense. Like the ones that clean or even sometimes top minnows, they'll have eyes that are like almost on the top of their head, and their mouth will turn up also because they're eating bugs at the surface. So, I mean, all these little things that I think a lot of people, myself included in the past, just take for granted or just say, oh, those fish are like that, didn't really ever give it a thought. They're cues about how we should be treating them, and same with plants, like the little signals and signs can tell you so much. And so I like to have a tank format that I kind of replicate a few different times, and then I'll change one variable in each tank every couple of weeks and kind of see what changes and see if I notice anything different or add a new fish. I'm kind of guilty of not holding on to fish more than 2 or 3 years each unless I really fall in love with them. And I tend to swap them with friends or bring them to the local fish club. Or if I breed them, I kind of check them off my list, and that's part of like almost like a little game for me is for nanofish anyways, is can I get it to spawn? And I feel like if I can get it to spawn, it's probably somewhat happy or somewhat close to a natural, vibe for it.
So when you say that you like to make slight changes on your tanks, do you document the changes you make, or do you just go for it or is it a process that you've got, like you can go back and look at changes? And
honestly, YouTube really helps that, because almost every week, most of the year, I'll do a walkthrough of the fish room every Friday or Tuesday. And one of the live streams will be just kind of answering questions, chit-chatting, and just showing all the tanks. And so it's really helpful if I'm kind of wondering in my head, like, man, I feel like last year this tank was all Amazon sword plants, and now the crypts have taken over. What, and I'll go back and look at the footage, and then maybe I'm right or wrong, but whatever. It's a nice diary system. But I also, for a long time, I would use a Sharpie, and then I just use tea tree oil on like makeup cleaning pads for like women's makeup and facial exfoliate. You can get these little tea tree oil pads, and they take the Sharpie off glass really easily, because the dry erase pens just don't show up well enough most of the time for me. But a lot of times I will note the parameters, and anything like if I have a spawn or whatnot, I'll put it on the side of the tank, not on the front glass, but I'll note it on the side, or I'll put a post-it note on it or whatnot. But yeah, I'll usually do something like that. But I'm fortunate enough right now that my life is fish, with YouTube and with consulting and now doing talks and things like that. Like, it's become, I used to be graphic design half the time, and this the other half for the 4 years of it. But the last 2 years, and with the lockdown, this kind of became viable with the help of my wife for insurance and medical coverage. I can get that through her work, luckily, and I'm very grateful to her for all she does to hold it down for us. She's the breadwinner for sure, but you know, I've always been someone who I've never owned a new car, or I don't go buy new clothes. Usually I'm one of those go to the secondhand store or make it, or only buy it from like here and there from really special occasions. So I tend to use things, and I tend not to spend much money than on the hobby, and I suppose Dr. Pepper, my biggest vice. So
we've got a couple of questions from Rochelle.
Sure.
A moment back. I'm just going to bring it up on the screen. Rochelle's one of our regular viewers, so she's asking.
Okay,
yeah. So I'll take that.
Okay.
You read that? I'll take that off now.
Yeah. Two questions. What are your 5 favorite fish species, and why? What is the most unseen fish you own? Okay. So you own and you question it's alive. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I think
so
that
I would
might
say
stem from Rochelle's coolie loaches that she never seems to see.
Right.
Coolie loaches.
No, yeah. I actually have one crazy coolie loach that is always in the front glass. As soon as the lights start, they have a 1 hour dimming switch on that tank. And as soon as that happens or food comes out, and he's big, he's probably like a 6 inch, probably. He's big, 5 or 6 inches. One of the biggest ones I've ever had. He almost looks like a dojo loach or something now. But I've had him a long time, and he's still trucking. I think he's probably 4 or 5. But he comes out and he just runs up and down the glass all the time, every night. And but no, I've had that issue with coolie loaches. I have thought that they all died. Dojo loaches, when they're young in a planted tank, I've had that. The very worst I've ever had, though, I would have to say are banjo catfish. Those things just headlong bury themselves. If you have sand or any sort of substrate, they're going to hide, and they have evolved very specific barbels and antennae to detect food without even having their eyes out of the sand. So they're able to sense, you know, a little food or like a scud or a worm or bloodworms. They're able to get that in the dark, you know, right from under it, and which is incredible to watch. Same with some of the goby species and things. Schismata gobius amapluvilosus. They're sometimes called dragon gobies. They're a small little goby, and they're wonderful fish. But you kind of need to keep them in a non-planted tank that has sand that contrasts them a little bit, and then stone. But they're big time hunters, like pea puffers, in that you can see their eyes track and they lock on, and then they kind of get this serious look, and they kind of shimmy back like a couple paces, and then all of a sudden, you know, or they'll settle into the sand, and then they'll, you know, pounce and hunt. So those are ones that I don't see very often, but when I do, I'm always impressed by them. Wood cats are another one that I just never see. I love them so much, but I only see them if I go in the fish room in the middle of the night and feed them like bloodworms and blackworms that are live blackworms, and turn like the lights all off in the room, and then wait with like a little LED off to the side, and you know, I'll hear them splash a little bit. But like Tatia mosaica or something like that is another species that I thought I had killed them all. And then, you know, sure enough, when I moved from my old house to this house 2 years ago, there were like all of them in a log, you know, together. So, yeah, as far as my 5 favorite fish, panda loaches are one of my very favorite to work with. I think they're an incredible fish. They're 100% shrimp friendly in my experience for Neocaridina anyways. Which is weird because they'll eat scuds and other things like that here and there. But they don't seem to want to eat the shrimp. And so I've really loved having some tanks that are non-heated, good aeration and filtration and good water changes on them. But I can do, a nice blue dream or something like that shrimp and actually get the colony to grow, and then keep 10 or a dozen panda loaches. And they're really expensive, unfortunately. $15 to $30 over here, usually a fish, generally, for a 1-inch fish. Feels like a lot, but I really do love them.
Yeah, I almost bought a group of them at the weekend as well. I seen them in my local fish shop, and I've never kept them before, and for the same reasons you like them, I've wanted to try them for my tank that I've got upstairs, but I opted against it. I didn't, and I guarantee I'll go back to buy them another time and they'll be gone.
Yeah, that's the thing, is they're very rare, and they're going to be. They're good. They should be endangered already, quite frankly. They only live in one river, and it forks into two major forks that are pretty far apart. Another little trick about those is there's the northern fork of the river. Those ones retain their black and white color into adulthood, or more of a cream and dark brown or black, grayish color. Whereas the other southern fork, which is a little warmer and a little more like tropical or temperate kind of temperatures in between there. Lots of tannins and things fall into the river as well, as I hear. Those ones tend to go to like a buttercream and off yellow kind of color, and their pattern changes to a chain link or even like spotted sometimes. So you can tell which one you've got by that. And if you've got the ones from the northern half of the river, they're the ones that are in the national preserve. And for a while, they did a license. I think there were 5 people in all of China licensed to collect them. And that's why they were so hard to find. That, and nobody had bred them in captivity until a couple years ago, at least in any number. But a guy by the name of, I'm spacing on his last name, but he owns a company called Aquatics in Florida. His name's Andre, or Andres. But yeah, he's was able to figure it out by using straws from bubble tea. You know what bubble tea is? Yeah. Like the Korean and Japanese style little drink. So those extra, so like this kind of size straw hole, and he put them in substrate straight up and down. And every other cave and setup he tried didn't work. But when he packed those halfway with sand and put them straight up and down, and then just scattered leaves around them, he found that they would actually come up, since they articulate at the waist, that the males would be in those tubes, but there needs to be enough room for the female to come in. So like a drinking straw, a normal one, doesn't work too well. But he figured out, and I guess that's how he was spawning them, and he shared that with me. And I thought, wow, I would have never thought to try that. So he came up with the idea. Yeah, he came up with the idea because pictures of the river they're from, and apparently there's these very small freshwater crabs or mussels, but one of the two makes these holes in the ground, like little tubes. And that's what he was kind of trying to mimic, I guess. Yeah.
So that's why it needs to study
how. Yeah. As I say, isn't it nuts and crazy how nature works? This one species does this, and then the other species manages to use it, and the next, like, everything just works together in little areas of different parts. It's just fascinating how nature does what nature does. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like it. I like fish. I used to like colorful fish, for a long time. Colorful, flamboyant fish. That's where it was at. And now I like fish that care for their young or that have some really interesting behavior. That's what really excites me now. And I'm getting into keeping a lot more native North American fish, because there's some that have some pretty complex traits and behaviors. But same, to continue the little list quickly, I'd say CPDs are on there. Lake Inlet, I could list 5 species from Lake Inlet as my top 5 easily. That's my favorite biotope. I don't know why, but it seems so magical to me. And there's so many endemic species in this, 40-kilometer long lake that's only 15 feet deep. Yet there's 56 species in that lake, and I think 16 are endemic or something like that to that water basin. But I like CPDs and erythromicrons. Those are always really cool fish, or the emerald dwarf rasbora, as they're called, which is, they're not really emerald at all, and they're not a dwarf version of anything, and they're not a rasbora, but that's what we call them here in the U.S. So I opt for yeah. But then I've been getting into wild bettas lately. That would probably be in my number 3. Stiphodons are probably in there, 3 or 4, top 3 or 4. And I couldn't really pick one species, but I'm blown away by the incredible way that they don't know how many there are, honestly, but there could be up to a few hundred undiscovered species from some of the experts I've talked with, because the Pacific Islands, out in the far Pacific, all the way to like Palau and Fiji and Guam, they have them, but all the way into Australia and Indonesia, they're also found in the Philippines. And a lot of them, when they spawn, they live in the fresh water, and they spawn larval young, which are only a few cells. They're very, very tiny. They're like plankton, and they get washed out down a creek from some island they're born on, and then they go float out at sea, and they fatten up on diatoms and little flagellate life forms and stuff. And then they come back to the fresh water when they're very small. But some of them can climb crazy waterfalls. They've evolved their pelvic fins to be a perfect little suction cup, which is really cool. And so they can stick to the glass, but they can stick to a rock that way too. And so they can rest, and then they can kind of wiggle and use their other fins to kind of scoot up and then stick again. And then because of that, they can climb waterfalls really well. And that's one of the kind of the trademarks of that genus. But they come in every color of the rainbow. And when they spawn for you, it's really beautiful. I've never tried even to run through bringing them into a saline environment and keeping it, tropically like calibrated to tropical microfauna. Seems like a tall order, and I think a few Germans and a few Polish folks I've read online have done it, but for the most part they're all wild caught still. But I love keeping them. I feel bad that it's not a more sustainable fish, in the sense that they're not being bred in the hobby really. So yeah. But I would say that's probably a list of 4 or 5, 6, something like that, fish that I've just the last one I would say is Battis, like Dario or Battis. I don't know why I like both of those, but those are they're very similar to a little cichlid. In fact, I've even seen them take care of their young for a week or 2 sometimes, and they can be really vicious. This little 1-inch long fish can kill its mate, and does frequently. They can change sex and be fertile both ways. A female can turn male and a male can turn female. in midlife. And so they're kind of just this enigma to me as I bred them. That, and for years I was like, why can I not find a female? It took me years to get a female. And I finally found out from a guy who lived in India. He said that the males are very similar to cichlids. And so they go into these rice paddies and shallow marshes. And it's in the, as the dry season's starting to begin, the water gets really low, and that's when they spawn and pair off. And then they do it again, another round of it when the rainy season's about to start. But when they're in those low water areas, sometimes as little as an inch of water, they build a little nest area. Like they clear out the algae and the mulm, and they usually have sand or little pebbles, like little rocks that they put in a circle. And sometimes they'll even decorate the outside with a contrasting color, which is cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they'll lay the eggs in there and guard it while the eggs are there. And sometimes they'll even guard the very young babies for a few days. Even though most of what you read online says that they don't have parental care, I think it's just really inconsistent. But breeding those, when I talked to the guy, he said it's because the males, when they go out collecting, they come out and they defend the nest, and they're bright red, whereas the females, they hit the deck and they hide in the substrate. So collectors figure people want bright fish anyways, and it's just so much easier to get a little inch-long fish that's literally coloring up more and, lunging at your little net than the females, which take off.
Yeah.
But that's why it's pretty difficult to find a female, according to a guy I was talking to who collected them for retail.
Sorry, Cam, just before we move on, you mentioned you're getting right into the North American natives.
Yeah.
I noticed on your Facebook page a few days ago you posted sticklebacks.
Yeah.
Is that the 3-spine stickleback?
It's the 3-spine, correct?
Yeah,
yes.
We have them here as well.
Oh yeah,
the exact same one. Yeah, we've got them like maybe 20 meters for this house.
Oh, nice.
And I've done the thing with my daughter, and I've pulled them out and done the biotope and things like that. But
cool.
Talking about unique behaviors.
Oh man,
things, they're amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably seen it, but that's one thing I've wanted to document on this channel for a long time, because I go and I sit by the local ponds and creeks that have them here too. And not only, they are one of my very favorite fish as well. And partially because we don't have that many fish where I live that are aquarium sized, but because the behavior for spawning is incredible. For one, they color up a beautiful blue or green, depending on the creek they're in here. And sometimes they're even like blue and red together, the males, and then the females get up. Yeah. But the actual, one of the really fascinating things to me too about them is that they have the oldest research done on them and evolutionary biology. Some of the first evolutionary biology looking into epigenetics was done here in Washington, in Lake Washington, because when humans first moved into, or I should say European humans first moved into Lake Washington, they clear cut everything and they dumped all the city's sewer into this lake, and it was a major disaster. I mean, people wouldn't swim in the water. People would get giardia and dysentery and all these other things, typhoid, all the terrible diseases of the turn of the century and stuff you'd get from the water. And the visibility was less than a foot in the lake from just all the silt and problems, because they also dammed up rivers, and then they diverted other things and drained like sawmills and things and pulp. And when they decided, well, we need to clean this up because the whole metro area is kind of building up around this 60-kilometer long lake. That's kind of the whole metro area for Seattle, is between there and then the Puget Sound. And they decided to clean it up in the 1950s. Well, they had already done studies in the 20s and 30s on sticklebacks, but the sticklebacks in Lake Washington had almost no spines and almost no armor and almost no coloration. And as the lake cleared up all the way through the 1980s, their spines grew all the way to around, a centimeter and a half in some cases. And you can tell by the angle of the spine, how long the spine is. You can tell if they're being predated on by birds and other like mammals. Whereas if it's a barbed spine, that's for those. Whereas if it's a straight up and down spine, that means that they're being predated by aquatic animals like bass or something like that. And then the armor on them, they have up to 28 plates of armor and as little as none. And it's directly, like, you can graph it, and it's a linear correlation with the water visibility and the amount of predation going on in their area. So you can literally find one from a pond or a lake around here, and you can tell how clear that water is if someone brings you that stickleback and you're familiar with them. And I've also charted, as a personal project, I've charted where they're born, and they're realizing now that they couldn't have just straight evolved through selection in 3 or 4 decades that much. So now they're realizing that this is a very ancient lineage of fish. It's been through a lot of changes, and that's all stored in its genetic code. And rather than having to totally re-evolve it, it has an epigenetic marker, kind of like us going through puberty, where certain environmental cues, ages, or whatever it may be, hormones, will trigger it, like grow that spine, or grow, start using lycopene to sequester that red for spawning season, or whatever it may be, and put that into your pigment. And so I love being able to take that little tiny fish and read all about, I can tell you what part of the lake it came from, whether it was from the marshes or whether it was from the creek and the spillway where there's gravel, or whether it was from open water. Because if they're from open water, they have a silver belly to mimic the sky and reflect UV light for predators below. And then they have a dark gray or even blue body top above. Down their lateral line is where it splits, because from above they want to be dark so that they can't be spotted for birds. So they're an absolute perfect teaching tool about evolution and epigenetics, and they're just tough. I mean, I've had them survive 100-degree temperature in my pond one summer, so like 40 Celsius, or something like that, and they survived that. And then they've also been under 3 inches of ice. So they're a really fascinating creature. And where they've been found in lakes in Canada and Alaska and Greenland even, they've completely evolved new traits and things that aren't seen in any other populations. And genetically, they would probably, it's debatable, but they're probably different species. Within as little as 10,000 years, they're no longer able to spawn with the stickleback from the outside world. So it's really fascinating too how they get stuck in these remote lakes and things, and how their eggs can be digested by a duck or most waterfowl, and then be we'll say excreted and still be viable. So yeah, I could go on and on, but I'll shut up. Sorry.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic fish, and the fact that they're spread right across the northern hemisphere just shows you how long they've been about. We've actually in Scotland we've got one location where they've got the spineless sticklebacks, but it's a closed off loch or lake. I've never found them there yet, but Yeah, really, really fascinating.
Do you have the 9 spine also there, or the 4 spine, or 2 spine?
I think we have the 4 spine. I've never heard of
Okay.
the 9 spine, but I know
Okay.
we've got the 3 and the 4, and then the no spine one.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll find
That's
that blog
cool.
because I've got pictures of them, and I'm sure I've got a video clip of them actually building the nest as well, or the male. So
Oh,
I'll send it.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna what I got off track saying, and then I'll shut up about sticklebacks. But you've probably seen it, but in case anybody else hasn't, it's amazing. Sticklebacks are able to, the male's able to size up the female, and the female gets fat like a square or a rectangle, or like a rectangle almost. She kind of looks like a pea puffer when she's gravid, and the male's able to look at her for a few days and know to the millimeter how big around she is. And then he builds a little tunnel that goes down and out, and he agitates her when he's ready to spawn, and he bugs her and bugs her and bugs her rather than doing like an elaborate dance necessarily. Usually they do shimmy and shake and stuff too, but usually they do this thing where they just kind of pester the female, nip at their fins lightly and poke them in the belly with their nose. And then they'll get chased finally, and they'll go down into the substrate, into the nest, and they'll go through that tunnel that's tapered, and they've built that tunnel specifically so she'll wedge herself in it when she chases them. And then in some locations, they actually have a stick that they build on the top, like a little twig, and it's going like crisscross to the main tunnel that's tapered. So the female gets stuck right here, and then the male comes out and he pulls on the stick, and the sand on top of it collapses on her. So she's struggling, but that pressure on her body actually triggers her to release her eggs, and then he fertilizes the mound and guards it. So I mean, yeah, they're I don't know, they're just endlessly fascinating. The more I read about them, and they're one of those fish I just love watching from the side of the creek, you know.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I think from childhood, it's one of the first ones you see.
Yeah,
and it's one that stuck with me throughout my whole life. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah,
they sound like an absolutely phenomenal fish. We don't have them here. I know literally nothing about it, but I've been hanging on every single word during that. That was wow. That's cool. Yeah. Something that I sort of wanted to bring up is the way that you present your stuff. You have this incredible way of holding everyone's attention as well as giving in some incredibly in-depth information. Is this something that you've developed, or is this just the way that you are, and you always just can analytically bring out all this information, or does it involve a lot of deep diving and researching?
Well, so I am a pretty obsessive person. And I could obsess about anything, any number of things, because I love when somebody is in love with what they're doing, whether that's a mason or a tailor or whatever, an angler. It doesn't matter. Like any profession or skill. When you see someone who's mastered something, or they love it, and they know the nuances and the subtleties of it, like that to me is like such inspiration. Like that's what life's about to me, is those true mastery. And at least if you can't do it, at least knowing others who can, and then being able to access their mastery of it. But I love seeing that. And one thing that I've always felt was a bit I feel this way about math, but it's a little too dry usually. But I had videos on the Fibonacci sequence and why it's found in the way fish scales are arranged, and what it has to do with hydrodynamics or S-start motion in baby fry. So I like to read like physics papers or botany papers or whatever is coming out. I love seeing when somebody's put years of work into something and they're excited about it. And if I can access that and try to share that excitement and maybe get someone else to learn about things, I really enjoy that. And so I would say it starts with me doing a lot of researching and a lot of like introverted stuff. Like I'm just on my own. I have access through friends and through subscriptions to a lot of scholarly journals and a lot of archives that I've just learned how to get, into this university or that university, look up this paper or that paper. And also, YouTube is a great resource. It's just YouTube, Wikipedia, they're all kind of, in my mind, just as dubious sometimes about the authenticity of when you need to be very precise. But if it's just for entertainment, do whatever you want. But for me, when I'm trying to relay, I try to go to the ichthyologists and the people that have dedicated their life to that fish, read about that. And then I try to go and find out, well, then who cataloged it and who discovered it? Is there an interesting story there? Is there a human story there? Were these fish evolutionarily something interesting? Is there a story like the sticklebacks? Is there something like that hidden in the behavior or the appearance of the fish? Is there like in Corydoras, or as Dr. Anthony would say, Corydora? He'll be mad if he hears that. So that's why I had to do
He's
that.
gone. He's already gone.
But if like the reason they have venom glands in their side, but don't really have a great way to use them other than to poison themselves in a bag. Some of these things are pretty interesting. But I just love being able to find the interesting tidbits and then relay them. But I've always had a mind that's obsessed with like trivia, because I feel like if you have this line of facts, you can put them together in a story. And the more stories you kind of have, like, here's my story about fish, and here's my story about plants. And then soon you realize they're all the same story. Like the world all overlaps when you start learning more about each field. It's incredible how interdisciplinary studies, whether it's like biomimicry and like the defense department, studying fish for the speed of torpedoes moving through water or whatever it may be. It's these crossed, these converging studies or tidbits that you may never think of putting together, and someone does. Or I like to encourage experts of different things to talk, because as we all listen to each other, maybe it will spark something in someone's mind, and maybe something new will come from it. And if nothing else, hopefully it will encourage us to find joy and wonderment in the complexity of the world. But if nothing else, maybe also a bit of understanding and value to even mundane things. I don't have kids, but if I did, I would something I say to my friends when they're whining is like, how can you be bored? Like, boredom is a luxury. If you have a roof over your head, you have food in your stomach, like you don't have a crisis going on right now, like how could you be bored? The world is incredible. Like even if you're stuck in a room with your own mind, it may be quote unquote boring, but you have so many places to go with just your past experiences and things you're wondering how they work. And I like to encourage that spark in others. And then I like to watch them, once that's ignited, I like to talk to them and watch them, fuel it and come and tell me something that I didn't know, and my channel is really just all me learning what I'm interested in or what people ask questions about. If I don't know, I try to track it down, try to talk to the experts. And then if I have little stories or trivia that I've acquired, I put it together. But ironically, I can't remember someone's name when I meet them the first time, half the time, or a phone number ever for the life of me. Even since before cell phones, like I was never good at that. I'd write my arm as a teenager was always covered in notes, like from, don't forget your math homework. Don't, whatever, don't do this, do that. So it's odd, but I'll remember how much a fish weighed that set the record for size and what year it was caught, or something like that. But for some reason, I just can't do it with some of the everyday things. Yeah.
Well, whatever you're doing, what you're doing is phenomenal and fantastic. So please continue it. It's,
thank you.
Very much appreciated by many people.
Well, I'm honored to come on the show and to meet you guys face to face, and so I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'll keep doing what I'm doing as long as YouTube has become now. It's trickiest now because when it becomes your full-time job and you've decided to say, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do, then you really need to rely on it. And YouTube's kind of a roller coaster as far as views and this and that, and chasing clickbaity stuff and thumbnails, and it's all such a struggle in my mind of what is being authentic to yourself and what you want to communicate. And to me, as long as I put the educational in there and I'm not way off basis of what we're talking about, that's kind of where I've settled for my ethical stance on that. And I try not to sell anything that I don't truly believe is making the hobby better. So like I'll support, Arkoff, for instance, like Dr. Anthony's research project and his fundraising and stuff like that. But I'm never gonna, I get emails constantly now with the channel where it's at, just of here, we're gonna send you this filter and we'll give you $500 to make a video on it. And I'm like, maybe I'll try the filter, maybe if I need a filter, but I can't take your money for that. Like, I'm not going to be jaded or what's the word? Tempted or swayed by that sort of thing. And so, the bigger or the longer your channel is around and the more, I guess, credibility that you manage to gain, which I try to do by, when I make an error in a video, I try to correct it or post it or take the video down if I got something really wrong scientifically or whatnot. But, it kind of builds on itself to the point where now I'm working harder on each video because there's more people watching, there's more experts watching, there's ichthyologists watching that specialized in that fish, their whole career. And it's pretty exciting now when it's you have someone who's a specialist in it, and then they want to talk to you more about it, and you're like, oh, they don't have anything to say, like that I screwed that up really bad, So it's all a big learning process that way. But it's also a mix for me. I've never liked to be an over produced channel, like bells and whistles and like this set, this fake green screen is something I made with AI and then Photoshop. Basically, I kind of put some pieces together, but it was my if I were a billionaire, like what my dream office or den would be a map room and a full of scientific periodicals and then aquariums and plants. So
yeah, sounds like a dream.
Yeah, someday maybe.
Since you've started doing your YouTube, obviously it's opened up opportunities for you out with your own channel, isn't it? For example, the work you do with Ivan McColgy for the Green Earth Alliance is something that started a couple of years ago, and it was you and Ivan and his sister that launched that. So that's a power for good. That's come directly from YouTube.
Yeah, so, and I always have looked up to Ivan since even before I kept Planet Tanks. I just saw his photography, and I didn't even know who he was. And then when I put it together that oh my gosh, he's, for lack of a, in my mind, and this is just my opinion, but he's almost like the Amano right now of like South America in my mind.
Yeah.
And he's just incredible. He's an incredibly kind guy too. And so I reach out to my heroes, or to the people who inspire me, or the people who are clearly experts or have a lot of experience in something that I'm trying to understand. And when I reached out to him initially, it was like talking to an old friend. And then we hit it off, and then he was like, we can use your YouTube, because I said, yeah, let's promote your book. Like, I love, he gave me an early copy, and or I bought an early copy at that point in our friendship, and I ordered it from the UK printing, which came out earlier than the US printing. So I paid $300 with shipping for this book at the time, but that's how excited I was about his book, and like I said, I don't spend money on much. And that, his Orinoco book, what just blew my mind, that showing the fish from aquarium community tanks in their natural habitat. It was so needed in the hobby. And even if everyone doesn't own the book, the images get around, they're stunning, the work he does. And also just knowing, it's surprising sometimes to know in the dry season that, what a Bolivian ram might be able to be in alkaline water or something, like, because the groundwater might be sitting on limestone, and it might have rained enough that it dilutes the tannins and everything, and they overflow out of the area. Or that a pH could be as low as 3 for some fish, like woodcats when they spawn. So the fact that he was going these places and taking pictures and documenting the extremes, even just within the one river basin, is just, I don't know, it blew my mind. So I really looked up to him. Plus, he's an artist, like a classical artist, with mixed media paints and things. Mm-hmm. And I've done that my whole life. And I did that for a living, both as a tattoo artist, a graphic designer, and a mural artist. But I also had a studio I had a studio with a gallery space in Seattle. And although it feels like a different life now, because fish have kind of taken over and at my time, and also I just kind of got tired of the art world. But for a while, I was doing exhibitions where I had a show in Cairo, I had a show in Paris, I had a show in LA. So my artwork for a while was actually gaining traction, and I'd sell something that was expensive here or there, but for me, I always would want to give away the art to kids who were in love with a piece, or like someone who'd come in who's broke, and I'd be like, well, they're staring at it for 2 hours or whatever. They keep coming back to this piece, and they're like, I got $50 or whatever. And that's who I'd let the piece go to, even though on the wall it was supposed to be $2,000 or whatever, and the gallery gets half or whatever it may be. And then just the socializing that came with being an artist for a living. Now it's a bit different. I feel like the internet has allowed some freedom in people to market themselves and have a website of their own and these kind of things. But when I was at my peak of all that, it was, you had to be friends with this wealthy person who owns a gallery, who's a trust fund kid or whatever, and that's who's going to buy your art if you want to make a living in any other way other than licensing or selling like farmers market crafts, or something like that, which in Seattle, it's one of the most expensive cities in the country. I worked my hardest and the most I made, and I'm open about it because I think workers and people should, I don't feel like others should be obligated, but I think it's helpful for people to be transparent about what they make for what they do. And, I was working like 80 hours a week between painting and then going to the farmer's market, sometimes 90. And I loved it. It was art, but I hated the selling of it, handling the business of it, paying the taxes, doing all that. And you know, I was making, I think 54,000 was the most I made in a year, that I felt was in a sustainable way. Like, yeah, you might become a good enough artist that you can sell each piece for that, but that's pretty rare. You know, it was more like $1,000 piece here, bunch of $20 postcard or posters and some $4 postcards or whatever. And it was just always a grind, no health care, no retirement. And so I kind of got out of it, even though that was the original love of my life. And it was very focused around nature too. But I think now I feel like between teaching and learning on my channel, I love both those things. Those are probably my first loves in life, is just learning anything new, just blow my mind. I love it. And you can learn from everyone, you know. So social media has really opened that up. It's just, I wish our society put more emphasis on fact checking or validation of information, rather than just the acquiring of it, you know. And I think sometimes it's especially in America, the last 4 or 5 years or whatever, I guess 8 years, whatever it's been now, politics and media and everything, it's kind of like the loudest voice and the most repeated message sometimes gets the day. And it's kind of the opposite of what I stand for, as well as paywalls and charging for education. Like I to be a member on my site, you get access to my, like on YouTube, you get access to my bibliography and a little bit of extra content. But even then, if anybody asks me, I'll give them all that for free, because I just feel like gatekeeping educational information that's not even mine. I didn't do the years of research to find out stickleback evolution works the way we talked about. But I do think that in America, getting an education has become so expensive that you can become almost an expert if you understand how to vet sources and find good experts without having to pay for it. You can kind of learn yourself a lot of things, maybe not being an electrician or being a doctor, but a lot of different fields are pretty accessible once you kind of learn to sift through what's to be believed and what's not. So
yeah, that makes sense.
You mentioned your site. Have you got a website as well?
I do have an art-centered site still. Right. It's somainkdesigns.com. Soma, as in SOMA, the mythical drug or medical cure in Sanskrit tradition, but also in Brave New World, it's like the medication they give everyone to keep them docile and happy and in this dystopian future. But it's also in Sanskrit, it essentially means where mind and body meet, or where your mental thoughts meet your physical actions. And it's this kind of concept of, I'll stop going on a tangent, I'm sorry. Right. But basically where you have a thought in your head that's abstract, and information and some electrons, or, you know, they didn't think of it that way back 4,000 years ago, but from an abstract thing that you can't hold on to, you can draw a blueprint and you can have someone build something. And that idea of when your soul or your thoughts or whatever you want to call it goes from intangible to tangible, that was another early meaning of Soma, was kind of the intersection of where the ethereal and the grounded meet. So I liked that name, and that was the name of my tattoo studios for a number of years. And then as I did more and more tattoos, I realized a lot of the people I was tattooing had businesses, or they were in bands, or they were doing different things like that. And now it's been 20 years since I started tattooing. So it's been, it's changed quite a bit, you know. It was still a bit more fringe, I would say then. And now it's so mainstream. And even as I was, when I closed my shop, it had become fully mainstream by that point, you know, all those reality shows, and, you know, it was just as likely that I'd have, you know, a 60-year-old woman come in with her daughter as a biker or whatever, you know, whereas the first few years it was like all punk rock guys and goths and bikies and, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I was looking at your shop on your YouTube channel, and I noticed that you've got a beta design.
Oh
Was that
yeah,
your own design? Did you do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Those are originally those are woodcuts,
Right.
and then I touched them up with a Sumi ink, and in each case I took the ink and I ground it from carbon and from aquachar and Sumi ink half and half, like the Japanese ink that you put into a mortar and pestle and grind. And so I used the tank water and I used bioactive, which is just symbolic because, I mean, now it's all digitized, but the originals were done that way. First wood block cut, print, and then any details that were flowy I did with the Sumi ink brush, with a piece of bamboo, traditional Sumi style. And all the profit to that goes to anything that's my merchandise. I don't keep that money. So we pick different, on my channel. I say, hey guys, anybody got a good, you know, freshwater ecology or fish conservation cause or charity, and I donate that. And honestly, it's usually anywhere from 20 to maybe in the holidays, $200 or $300 at most. But that money goes straight to causes for preservation, conservation, and discovery. And not Ivan and I's charity either, or nonprofit. Ours, if I can give it a little plug, the Green Earth Alliance, that as he's called back home, Yvonne or Ivan, and Yelka, his sister, and she's like a tech whiz and just altogether social media and or strategizing, planning, dates, accounting. She's like machine. Yeah, she's a machine. Yeah, totally. And Ivan and I are a little more artist, I guess. We can deal in that realm, but it was really nice to have her on board to kind of be like, guys, focus. Like, we need to talk about this.
I know. I've experienced it firsthand as well, Alex. She really is the brains behind everything in Ivan's world.
Oh yeah, she's. I mean, Ivan will go make the art and then be like, I don't know, I'm gonna put on a hard drive and go do more art, you know, take more photos. And she's like, what are you doing? You have 800 hard drives,
thousands of photos.
Yeah, you should be licensing these. You should do this. You should do that. So she thinks really big, and I really admire that too. And she's just a brilliant lady and a kind lady. Mm-hmm. But we got together. We all hit it off when we started talking after his book. After I kind of pushed his book, and I think I sold like 130 pre-sales of the 2,000 or 1,000 that he did originally. And he was really, surprised. So was I, honestly, at that price point on the book, that YouTube was that responsive. At the time, I think I had maybe 15,000 subscribers or something.
Yeah, you were close to that. And I remember the live stream. I was in the background.
Oh, thanks.
I was commenting in the comments as Ivan. Doing social media at the time, so
okay.
I remember it well.
Yeah, so yeah, you know all about it then. But that whole thing, I was pretty impressed that we were able to kind of get at least some people into. We had a lot of people sign up saying they wanted to help too, and so my idea for the nonprofit, because they just knew they wanted to put Ivan's work. They wanted it to make money for conservation. And that's kind of what they came to me with, like, let's brainstorm this. And I had always been obsessed with the idea of Kiva, which was a nonprofit that started around probably 2006 or so. And you would give money in the form of microloans to single women with children in the developing nation. and they would pitch an idea. So they would have access to like a laptop in like maybe in Lagos, Nigeria, or in somewhere in Mozambique, and they would go to a rural or maybe even just a poor slum type area or favela or something, and they would allow them to use the computer, a camera and things like that. They have a site there, and they'd say like, give us a business pitch. And with how much money in the West we have compared to what daily living costs other places, a lot of times it would be like, I need to buy the time to bake bricks at a kiln in town, and I need the mud, the mud's free, but I also need rebar, and I'm going to make a pizza oven or a bread, a flatbread oven. And then I'm going to sell that. And, then I'll build my business from there. And that was one example of a cause that I put $50 towards. She only needed, I think, $400 for the whole thing to get her business up and going. And so then they pay back Kiva. And I think, I believe it's still this way. I think there's no interest, but then you can, once they pay you back, you can give it to the next person. And so your money, you can keep rolling it over and selecting projects. Yeah. And I really like that. But Ivan told me this story about how, he's always spending his own money on trying to preserve things or trying to help a cause. So like in Venezuela, the country's not in a good way financially, obviously, but there were specimens from like the 1860s all the way through the 1920s, a lot of them one of a kind at a university of certain species of fish. And the problem was that the cork had rotted, like the formaldehyde or whatever was eating through the cork, along with maybe there was some sort of weevil or little bug that was boring through it. But they were starting to lose specimens, and they needed to buy new cork stoppers that were rubber or plastic or whatever they were. And it was going to be, I think, $158 for like 250 of them. But nobody would approve it in the budget in Venezuela or at the university or, And so it was a matter of Ivan just going on eBay or whatever and buying, or Alibaba, and buying stoppers and doing it. But that made me think when he was telling me that, like, what if we start, focusing on developing nations, and we talk to the people who have accredited PhDs or their doctorate students, and we ask them what is standing in the way of you cataloging more fish and doing more taxonomy, doing a study on the fisheries or the ecology or sustainability of this or that. And, a Western, US like Oxford, or UK like Oxford, Cambridge, or US Harvard or Stanford, they'll spend $150,000 just paying the professor for the study to go abroad. It may be $2 or $3 million to get something done, because they have to have insurance for getting kidnapped. They have to have, the grad students fly down, and they have to have this and this and this. And some of those regulations are obviously a good thing, but also there's a lot of waste when you've got people that may even be educated in those same universities, and they've gone back home. Maybe they got their degree in the 70s when the country, like Iran or something, was in a different way completely. And you've got these ichthyologists, these ecologists, these biologists that are just, screaming to save something, or they have a cause. And one, they don't have a social media outlet in the West or anybody with funding, or two, they just don't have the funding. And so we thought, let's eventually get this together. So we're going to try to make it more mobile friendly and everything, and basically vet projects and allow people to say, like, I want to go catalog these 7 suspected new species of pharowalas. I'm going to need kerosene and petrol for the canoe to go for 3 weeks up into the Amazon or whatnot. and food supplies, and I also need a wireless chip for my laptop or whatever it may be. Like there are these very, very achievable goals that could be crowdsourced. So we said, well, why don't we bridge that gap? And also in the meantime, Ivan and I both are into art, and then now I've got a platform that's growing, and he does as well, I would say, and a network of people. So we're like, let's put this to good use, and try to really amplify like the where there's the most opportunity for gain. Like if a species isn't cataloged, it's not going to make the IUCN Red List. It's not going to be protected ever. And there's a lot of countries that don't want their species on that list because the locals there are making money off of collecting it, or or they want to make gravel, pebble mines or jewel mines or copper mines or whatever it is, or logging. And so they don't necessarily want to fund the research into these things. And I feel like right now, in hindsight, there's going to be a time when we look back and we know it when we hear it, that 2/3 of freshwater fish are either threatened or endangered now. And I think there's going to be a time in like 100 years when we're going to say, what in the hell were we doing? Like as a species of humans, as a society, And so hopefully we can maybe bring some attention to that. I mean, that's the bigger goal in the channel. Like if I had to say, I can't have kids because of an injury, but my wife and I really wanted kids, and we tried for a long time. And now I've kind of decided that like my legacy is going to have to be something that is given out to the world differently than taught to a kid, kind of in that traditional sense. Yeah. And so I really want to make it, a love and appreciation for nature, and also just a general respect for humanity as well. Like be it the developing world or Oxford or Cambridge, we're all people. We all deserve the same respect and rights as one another, in my opinion. So
yeah, no, it's a very, very good cause, and hopefully it's a success.
Yeah, we haven't really done our big like coming out. It took us a while to get the tax forms done, and the Yelka was a pro at that. She got like a lawyer for us. They worked for free, all these things. But then we kind of need to tweak some board things, and we need to get some insurance. Like there's just kind of these cover your back things that you would never even know about until you set up a non-profit 501c3c. Yeah. So,
well, for the record, I bought the first NFT, and I was one of the first NFT owners on the Discord.
Yeah, so. Right on. Yeah. Awesome.
How long ago was it established?
What's that?
How long ago was it established?
We started it up during the lockdown, actually. Okay. So, right during the beginning of it, and then we the Green Earth Alliance, which is GEA, which kind of sounds like when said, which kind of sounds like Gaia. That was Yelka's doing, which I like too. I think that's cool. And we didn't even have a goal when we started it of like this needs to happen, but we were like we want to change things for the better, and we're sick of reading about this dam's going up and it's going to ruin all these fish. Like maybe we can fund breeding projects for Goodeids, or for the Montebello Dam in South America, the species that need saving, or wherever. Like, and we started with these like ideas, and we're like, man, that problem is too big. And so we kind of just had to keep chiseling it away. And I think now we created it a little prematurely, just thinking, well, a lot of people, I know a whole different crowd of people. And, he knows a lot of scholarly folks and academics, and she knows a lot of kind of wealthy people and tech people. And then I know a lot of artsy people, and also now through YouTube, that that crowd of academics as well as hobbyists. And so we just felt like the three of us as a foundation were a really good, triangle of sorts, like a base to, like, we don't know what, but we got to do something to help this planet, and fish. And and Ivan and I feel real similar about, like, if it's for a good cause, we both want to put our art or any of our creations or time completely, towards something.
We've had another question from the floor.
Yeah.
One up. If you could only keep one species of fish, what would it be? And the follow-up to that, which was missed, is why would it be that particular species?
Yeah. It's hard. It might be like an Endler or a guppy just because of the genetic possibilities. I feel like I could have one of every color fish eventually if I worked hard enough at it. Like in 10 years, I could probably end up with like a long fin, a short fin, a spade tail, a split tail. So I might say that, and that's also my first love was guppies as a kid. My first love was when I was 5. I had a goldfish named Elvis, but I won him at a carnival where you threw pennies into shot glasses, and if you made it into one with the fish and hit it in the head or whatever with the penny, you got to keep it. And I remember how mad my mom was about that, but we kept it in a literal fish bowl with nothing in it, and it lived for 4 years in that thing, the poor thing. But we just didn't know better, Then my mom felt bad for it when it died. Finally, she got me another fish, and it was or a fish tank, I should say. I think it was for my 10th birthday, something like that. And she would literally every 2 weeks, she would take the entire aquarium, disassemble it, drain it, put the fish in a cup. She'd scrub the sides with soap and water and the plastic plants. She'd rinse the gravel. I mean, she'd scrub this thing till it was spotless, basically totally uncycling it. And she'd do that every 2 weeks. And so if I ever missed a time, they'd get ammonia poisoning, and like, they're probably getting ammonia poisoning every week and a half anyways. But, it blows my mind how we used to keep fish. Before there were as many resources on the internet, you could go to the library, you could join a club or whatnot. But as a kid, it wasn't easy to feel like you could access all that necessarily. You talk to the guy at your local pet store, and especially when those were chain stores when I was growing up, and a lot of the local ones were kind of going away. It was a really sad time in that sense that we just got bad advice for so long.
Yeah, love it or hate it, the internet has done some really positive things for the fish keeping community, more so the fish that we're keeping, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, at the end of the day, I usually say there's no right way to keep a fish, but there's a few wrong ways. So like, as long as people are finding something that's enjoyable and sustainable, I think that's great.
And then that's an absolutely fair call. That totally makes sense. What is it about like aquatic life that fascinates you the most?
I don't know. It's a primal draw. Ever since I was a little kid, there was something, maybe it's a God complex, I don't know. But like when I was a little kid, I'd stand above a pond or a creek and I'd see fish or crawfish or, crayfish or little caddisfly larvae and frogs, whatever it was. And I was always just captivated by watching them. And I felt like I was this like omnipotent thing kind of looking down on their little world. And I was like, do they even know I exist, as a little kid? And then the challenge of trying to catch them, and then understanding like when they would like outsmart me somehow with some little maneuver, and I'd be like, wait, how'd that little thing, like its brain is so tiny, like what is going on here? Like how is it so perfect at every little thing it does in its environment? So from a really early age, it was something that I loved, and it was something that has always given me a lot of peace. I've always been an anxious person, especially when I was like working a 9-to-5 type job or in school. with kind of regimented deadlines, but more so just the approval of my peers and or a supervisor of some sort. Like I always didn't want to let people down, and I've always had health issues my whole life, and as well as just I'll just say bad luck, but like a rough go of like having family members pass away and just unfortunate events basically that kind of got in the way of like, oh, you got to go out, you're not going to be in school for a month, or I was in the hospital for a week this year and then 2 weeks that year and a couple times in my sophomore year. So there's kind of been this, this kind of anxiety, fear, and also maybe depression or existential loneliness kind of thing, and feeling connected to the world, not being a particularly spiritual person in any one like dogma or paradigm that exists, I would say. It makes me feel like I understand my place in the world, or at least I understand the things around me and their place in the world and the value that's intrinsically around me. And I think that draws me to it. But why underwater, I don't really know, other than maybe it feels alien, or it feels like I can't breathe under there. So I want to know more about this secret world,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
makes sense. So we're getting pretty close to the end of our time. I think we've probably got enough time to sneak one more question in, I think. You've recently been away and spent some time catching some fish in their natural sort of habitats and waterways and stuff like that. You planning on any more trips like that, or is that just
if they pay me to come, I will go anywhere. I mean, I will go to two people sitting in a field in Nebraska or whatever. I'll go to the Shetland Islands if someone will fly me there and wants to hear me talk about something. So basically it just comes down to affordability, but I would absolutely love to go somewhere. And I've been spending time in Florida because they've had me speak there at clubs a number of times, but also I'm kind of training myself. I have lupus, which is an autoimmune disease, and it causes a lot of inflammation, especially in hot temperatures. Yeah, or fire ants. Exactly. Yeah, you saw that post. My legs are just now going down. I think it's been 6 days since any fire ants bit me, and I finally have my ankles back. Like I just had these big swollen trunks of legs, and now I've got like bloody scabbed feet, but like they weren't even bloody. They were so swollen that they were just like weep. It was just gross. Yeah. But I have autoimmune reactions that are pretty strong for inflammation to a lot of things, including bugs. And Dr. Anthony and Arkoff, Dr. Anthony Mazeral, and the Ornamental Research Center, or the Research Center for Ornamental Fish in the Amazon. I've done some. I did a coloring book for them for kids, and
was that you?
Yeah, that's all my art.
Oh, that's brilliant! I never knew it was you that did that.
Yeah. And I do like Lucas Brett's, all his art and marketing. There's actually quite a few YouTube channels or nonprofits or professors that like need an infographic or a picture of something that they'll ask me and I'll do it. But so, and that started as something I was like, oh, I'll just do it for free, Dr. Anthony. And then we were like 80 hours into this project, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna need minimum wage here. I'm gonna need some. But I was hoping I could have banged out that project in 30 hours and just said ta-da, I'm here to help. But yeah, they did end up paying me for that. But that was a really, really like fun project to work on, and she wants Renee wants to do more, and follow-ups, and just hearing about all that, it's pretty exciting. I hope to go down to their center and to interact with the kids down there and to just go collecting in the field. I'm just literally afraid I will die. Like, that sounds like a dramatic statement, but without modern medical help, I really have to bring a big med kit because like a bee sting can kill me. And so when you're whatever a day from the capital city at best case scenario,
and you can't even access it by road either.
Right, exactly. And so it's like it's a dream to go there, but part of it's like I'm going to Florida, so I'm getting used to the heat. I stayed almost 20 days this time. I had all my teeth got cracked in an accident, but and broke. But I have implants, so I had 10 implants done when I was in Florida this most recent time. And I'm getting the top teeth done next. But I'm kind of trying to tick off my list these health things. I had a couple spine surgeries too that I needed. But I've been training with a pack on and just walking around my local neighborhoods and going up hills and through parks and things, just trying to get to a place where I have the best chance of surviving. Where I have the best, I'm set for going to do these things, because it really is a dream of mine to go there, or Lake Inle, or Papua New Guinea, or Borneo. Any of those places. It would just absolutely blow my mind to go there. Ivan wants me to meet him on the Colombian and Venezuelan border in some town, and he keeps saying like, "Oh, just come down. It's no big deal, man. Just bring cash and." It'll all work out. We'll use U.S. money, and we can just pay the border guards off. Buy a few cartons of smokes, and we'll give them out as we go. And I'll do all the talking. And I'm just like, we're gonna have to buy off border guards with guns and stuff. Like this sounds like a bit of a process, man. And he's like,
Ivan's just got a way of making everything sound easy.
I know. Totally, yeah. So, yeah, but I hope to do that. So anywhere in the U.S. or Europe, Europe is a place that I absolutely love. I wanted to move to either UK, France, or Italy. Honestly, I could have gone with any of them, but France, I speak French, and so for me, with the aquarium history and Germany and France, the history is so rich there too. I mean, the U.S. is too, but with my health problems, if I didn't have to pay out of pocket and with insurance, the things that insurance doesn't cover in our country anymore, with prior existing conditions, I could work 30% less for 30% less money than I do already. Like, I have an injection that's $1,600 a month just to keep me like functional with lupus. And in other countries, it's about $180 shot. So that gets frustrating, but just the culture and everything else too. Like, I'm just like, oh man, I want to go to Europe. But hopefully I can at least visit sometime soon. That's another big, goal for the near future.
Yeah. Well, traveling is not that. It's a lot easier now than it was 2 years ago, anyway. So
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your time and all you guys are doing and everything too. And it's cool to have this thing where you guys are like we're like different. We're like a triangle of people around the world right now. It's wild that we got this to work out. So and you guys gave me such a heads up time wise, like, hey, will this work out scheduling wise? So, just thank you. And thanks for everybody who's tuning in and joining us too. I really do appreciate y'all stopping by and listening to these guys and little old me.
No, thanks for joining us. I know Kat will say the same thing.
Yeah, very much. So we've got quick six very short answer questions to fire away. We'd like to end our live guests with very quick, very frivolous. So let's rock and roll with that, and we can close off. So
sure.
Doing a coin toss, do you choose heads or tails?
Heads usually.
Heads.
Ooh,
Do
controversial.
you think we're alone in the universe? Yeah, it's normally tails.
Am I alone, or are you like?
Do you think, as a whole, we're alone in the universe?
Yeah, no, I don't. But I don't think we'll ever see him, unfortunately. I don't think we'll ever communicate with each other. Fermi paradox.
If you could have a meal with anybody, alive or dead, who would it be?
Wow, that's really hard. I feel like I need to say something like super impactful, right? Something off the cuff and witty. But not, and it sounds cliche, but I'd love to sit with like Jesus or Muhammad or Siddhartha, one of the big religious leaders. I guess I would find it very interesting to see the reality and the interaction, and if I was blown away by them, then great, then that's all the better for my life and my well-being. But I'd love to see what all the hype is about, what's the reality of any given one of those kind of people.
Cool. Paper, scissors, rocks. Which is your first call?
Rock.
Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
Tea.
And what is your unicorn fish? That can be something you have studied, never seen, wanted to always keep in an aquarium, be out in the wild and see what's that one species for you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in theory, but lately I really like, I'm really drawn towards the mormyrids that are kind of unusual. I'd love a mormyrid tank with the elephant nose black ghost knife fish. It's an elephant nose and a ghost knife, but it's an electric fish as well. And you can put a receiver in the water and hear it clicking, like even just a headphone jack put in a guitar amplifier. I don't know the safety of that, but apparently that you can hear the like static clicking from it. Cool. And yeah, I'd love to have a biotope of them, or some Ultima Angels. I've always wanted those too.
Yeah, they're pretty
nice. If you ever get down to Peru, you can bring some back with you.
Yeah, well, and I could also say the green and orange discus that Dr. Anthony Mazeral brings back are incredibly beautiful too. I saw some in person finally. He and I were both in Florida at Grant Eater's house, and we were able to. He brought Grant some, and man, I think those are more beautiful than any of the man-made lines I've ever seen.
Well, that's one of the reasons they picked Iquitos, wasn't it? Because of those discos.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think that segues quite nice because from memory, we've got Grant coming on with us next time we have a guest. So that's
cool.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's a nice little segue. So I think he's 2 weeks away. We've got him coming on for a wee chat with us. So cool.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure, you guys. I like your shirt too, Cam.
Thank you. I like it as well. I noticed it earlier on.
Yeah. One of my favorites for sure. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on. It's greatly appreciated. So I'm sure everybody enjoyed it, and it's been fantastic to have some of your information, your knowledge passed through. So I really appreciate your time. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah. Sorry I rattle on. I rattle on tangents a lot, That's if you enjoy that, you'll like my channel. Come check it out. If you thought this guy did not shut up, then you probably won't like my style. But thank you guys. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one, Tim. Catch you later.
Bye.